You have cried out to us, more Skinwalker stories! And we have heard your cries. And today, we have an episode that is 6 Skinwalker stories just for you. This story comes from Curiosity 13. We'll call her Corey. One summer Saturday in 1988, Corey, her boyfriend Andy, his cousin Mark, and Mark's girlfriend Tracy were doing their usual quad riding in the mountains behind Andy's house. And just for a little background, Andy's family owned hundreds of acres, and that land had been in his family back to the early 1900s. All the parents are back at the main house, hanging out and playing cards, and this was pretty much business as usual for them back then. Now, on this particular weekend, Corey's quad isn't really running so hot. And since they don't really want to worry about having a quad break down on the trail, Corey just jumps on the back of Andy's quad. And about an hour or so into their ride, they decide to take a break at this spot a little bit off the trail that they'd already set up with some logs and stuff so they could just sit there and hang out for a while. And there's an open, clear sky with a nice, bright full moon that night. So they don't even need to bring any lights. And their eyes adjust to the dark pretty quickly. And the 4 kids are just sitting around having so much fun, just chatting and laughing and looking at the beautiful sky. When Tracy's face turns to a mask of fright and shock. She's looking straight behind Corey, and she starts to shake, and the tears well up in her eyes and stream down her face fast and furious. Corey stands up and walks over to her and asks, "What's wrong?" But Tracy is totally frozen in fear. Corey then turns around to look in the direction that Tracy is looking, and that's when she sees it. And she stands straight up and moves a little bit in front of Tracy and grabs Andy and points to the tree line. Andy's eyes follow where Corey is pointing, and Andy's eyes grow huge as he spots it. So then he grabs Mark and points to the tree line so Mark can see it. They all see what Tracy sees. It has a big, husky body, kind of like a bear, but not a bear. Its head looks like something you would expect to see on a caveman, but it's on all 4s and has legs like a horse. It's super weird. It's like nothing on this thing belongs with the rest of it. Like it morphed into all these things in a confused sort of way. And the eyes seem like they're glowing blue, like a blue flame. Needless to say, they are all terrified. This thing starts to growl at them and slowly starts stepping forward. So all the kids start backing up, and Corey motions to Tracy not to run. As calmly and as quietly as she can, Corey tells Tracy, "Get back on your quad, put it in neutral, and start backing it up." Tracy gets going and starts making her way back down to a spot in the trail where she can just coast her way down. Meanwhile, the beast lunges at the other 3 kids and kind of starts walking toward them in almost like a territorial bluff kind of way. And Corey and Mark get on the 2 remaining quads. Andy grabs the rifle that he always keeps with him and fires a shot, both to try to scare the beast away and as a distress call. This is pre-cell phone days, so this was their way of letting their parents know, we have a problem. So as Corey and Mark are slowly making their way back down the hill on the quads, Andy is walking backwards, never taking his eye off of this creature that is still moving and stalking in their direction. Luckily, this thing's glowing blue eyes made it really easy for Andy to keep a bead on it. And as they make it about halfway down the trail, they meet up with Andy's dad and his uncle who'd been coming up the trail. And Tracy runs to them and basically just collapses at their feet. And they start trying to help Tracy, thinking she's got some kind of a medical issue, when Mark calls out to them, points up the trail, and tells them to look for the flaming blue eyes. Andy's uncle sees it first and trains his spotlight on the creature. And now they can see it clearly for the first time. And they are horrified at what they see. This creature now has no hair at all, and it looks like it's inside out. This is the nastiest thing that any of them has ever seen. They start shooting at it, and it bolts away fast. And they think they got it with at least one shot, but they all head back to the house for the night because it's too dark and too dangerous to go looking for it now. The next morning, they all, except Tracy, gather together and head back out onto the trail to go back to the spot where they shot at the thing the night before. And they look around for tracks or blood or anything that will give them a clue as to either what this thing was or where it came from. Strangely, they found nothing. No tracks, no blood. It was as if the creature were never there, even though they all saw it with their own eyes. And according to Corey, Tracy was way too terrified to ever go back out on those trails again. But Corey, well, she's always been fascinated with things of the strange, dark, and mysterious variety. She says she was mesmerized the whole time she was looking at that thing. And she truly believes it was some kind of demon or goblin or whatever word you want to give it. Corey, Andy, and Mark still go out on those trails regularly, just a little bit more mindful of their surroundings. But they never did see it again. This story is from Kibbles13. She didn't give her name, so I'm going to call her Sienna. And Sienna's story takes place in October of 2011. At the time, she and her family were living on the reservation in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. And she says a lot of crazy Skinwalker stuff happened out there. But this night sticks out as being the scariest one ever. Sienna's parents were out playing bingo with her grandmother, and she was home alone with her little brother Hayden and her other brother Wyatt, who's the same age as she is. And Sienna and Wyatt want to pull an all-nighter, as teens left to their own devices will do, and they each chug a couple of monster drinks throughout the course of the evening. The three of them are just hanging out and watching The Lion King until they stop around 2:30 to get Hayden to bed. And after changing into his PJs and brushing his teeth, Hayden crawls into bed and Sierra tucks him in. And she remembers the clock in Hayden's room says 2:53 a.m. when she left to go join Wyatt in the living room to finish watching the last couple of minutes of the movie. And despite their energy drink infusion, once the movie is over, they are so tired, they decide to just camp out on the living room floor. So Wyatt turns off the TV, Sierra turns off the lamp, the clock strikes 3 a.m. and Sierra yells, "Ah, we made it to 3 a.m., but dang, we are not going to make an all-nighter." And the kids lay down on the floor, and Sierra's eyelids slam shut, but spring right back open again when someone starts knocking at the door. A few minutes later, another knock, but at the window. And Sierra thinks to herself, "Oh my God, that energy drink is really doing a number on me." A few seconds later, someone whistles, and she pokes Wyatt and says, "Stop it, you're scaring me." And Wyatt groggily lifts his head and says, "What? Not doing anything." And then another louder bang on the door. It sounds like someone or something really wants to get in. And they have two blue heelers who bark at just about anything, who've been quiet all night. But after they hear that last loud bang, they start going nuts. Wyatt goes to the door and is about one step away from opening it when Sierra grabs the back of his shirt and says, "Are you insane? We can't open that door." So instead, Wyatt creeps to the window and looks out. And the house has a security light by the door, but it hasn't gone on. So it's completely dark outside. "I don't see anybody," he says. Sierra and her brother are now officially freaked. the visitor or whatever it is keeps whistling while another one keeps banging on the door. And while all this is happening, Wyatt grabs Sierra's iPod and starts recording all of these noises that they're hearing. And while those two are busy in the living room, Hayden wakes up in his room scared, and he goes to the window, looks out, and sees this big black shadow that's tall and skinny, and it stares at him through the window for a good minute or two. Then it just runs away. And Hayden freaks out, closes the curtains, and runs to go get Sierra. All three of them are now huddled up in the living room, freaked out and totally scared, until the clock strikes 4 a.m. All the whistling, all the banging, all the noise stops. The kids breathe a collective sigh of relief and start running around the house, turning on all of the lights, including the bathroom lights. And half an hour later, their parents come home and say, "Oh, you guys are still up?" And Sierra, Wyatt, and Hayden all look at each other and say, "We're not going to sleep." Mom and Dad ask, "Why?" So the kids told them their story of everything that had happened that night, and even played the recording of all of the noises for them. Dad says, "Skinwalkers. Those are definitely skinwalkers. They use animal bones to make those loud whistles." And in the morning, the kids show their parents and the medicine man where the skinwalkers were doing whatever it was that they were doing. And around the window and the door, they see footprints and pick up some bones. The medicine man tells Hayden that he's very lucky that he didn't get cursed by that skinwalker that was outside his window, and that it's a really good thing that Wyatt didn't open that door. The original poster of this story goes by CLT14. We're just going to call her Claire. Claire lives on the Navajo reservation, not far from Chinle, Arizona, and is always hearing creepy stories from friends and relatives. And growing up, even had a few scary experiences of her own. But on April 10th, 2010, she had the scariest experience of them all. That morning, Claire's mom was worried about Claire's grandma being alone in her house. So Dad goes and picks up Grandma at her house and brings her back to Claire's house. And later that day, her parents want to take Grandma out to go have some fun. But Claire really doesn't want to go with them. They're heading out for a night at the casino. So Claire says, no thanks. And after they leave, she enjoys an awesome afternoon and evening all to herself. As evening turns to night, she makes sure that both of her parents' cars are locked, that the front and back doors to the house are locked, and that the windows to the house are shut and locked. And as it's creeping closer to midnight, she decides to watch a little TV. And she remembers falling asleep on the couch with the TV still on. At 2:50 a.m., she wakes up, turns off the TV, goes to her bedroom to get her pajamas on, and goes to the bathroom and brushes her teeth. And when she's finished, she walks to the kitchen to turn out the light. Just when she's ready to flip that switch, the clock starts to chime, signaling 3 a.m. And before it can even finish its 3 a.m. proclamation, Claire hears a knock at the front door. Confused, she thinks to herself, who in the hell would be at my house at 3 a.m.? And she hears another knock. And then another. And she thinks, do I open it? And she starts walking toward the door. And she starts leaning in to get a look through the peephole when the knocking gets louder. Now, their front door has this little entrance space. So it's like this little room that you have to walk through to either walk in or walk out of the house. And there's a security light in there that always turns on when someone steps into that room. And Claire backs away from the door and thinks, why didn't that security light turn on? And she gets scared and she starts backing away from the door when the knocking turns into banging. And after about 2 minutes of constant banging. She can't take it anymore, and she starts moving toward the door. She unlocks the top lock on the door, and the banging gets even louder. It seems like whatever it is gonna break down the door. So as she's standing still by the door, fear trying to get the best of her, she turns on the outside light, hoping to scare whatever or whoever it is away. But it doesn't work. The banging gets louder, and she is ready to bolt and go call for help. But she decides she needs to see what is on the other side of that peephole. And Claire takes a deep breath, leans in closer to the door, and gets her eye up to that tiny opening. And the noises disappear, and there's no one on the other side. This story is from Romer 12. We will call her Riley, and we'll call her friend Marcy. Riley lives in Gallup, New Mexico, a city surrounded in Native American culture and history. They have many surrounding towns and reservations that have been there for a long time, and lots of people say some of them are haunted. And Riley's experience actually takes place in Gallup, on the east side of the city near a small reservation. Marcy would visit her sister every weekend in her low rental apartment on the east side of the city. And during these weekends, Riley would spend the night with Marcy in her sister's apartment. And at night, when there's absolutely nothing to do and the kids and the parents were asleep, Riley and Marcy would go outside and just chill in the courtyard park that was in the middle of the apartment complex. And one night, they are so bored, they decide to walk to a 24/7 convenience store at 2 a.m. And they were used to being up late, so they were wide awake. And they start down the road that goes behind the apartment building, where there are no lights and tons of brush and prairie dog holes on the ground. And as they're walking, Riley senses somebody staring at them or following them. And she turns around to look, but there's nothing there. And she looks forward again, and Marcy grabs her arm and whispers in her ear, "Oh my God, what was that?" Riley looks into the darkness and sees nothing. There's a slight breeze that night, and there's a lot of trees in front of them. So Riley just kind of passes it off as the wind blowing and moving all of the trees. And Riley tells Marcy, "It's just the wind, chill out." And the girls keep walking. But as Riley looks again, she sees what looks like a black figure moving through the trees. And she stops, and she tells Marcy, "I think that's just a drunk crashing out back there for the night." And Riley is doing her best to keep a calm voice so she won't scare the crap out of Marcy. But that was almost impossible, because she was sensing that this thing in the trees wasn't a drunk crashing out for the night, and that it wasn't nice. And she asks Marcy, "Do you want to go back home?" And Marcy says, "No, we're almost to the store. Let's just keep going." As they keep walking, they hear movement in the trees. Swift, fast movement, as if something is darting around. And they start walking faster, like power walking. Riley hears something behind them, so she turns to look, and she sees what looks like a wounded dog or something. Now that in itself isn't super scary, because where they live, they have lots of stray dogs. But what she hears next stops her dead in her tracks and paralyzes her from the legs up. Riley hears this thing kind of moan and growl at the same time, as if it wanted her for a snack, and she can't move. And Marcy tries snapping her out of it, saying, come on, we gotta run." But Marcy's screams sound distant, as if Riley's gone deaf, or as if she's far away. Riley had made eye contact with this thing, and she knew that was a bad decision. And Riley closes her eyes and says a short prayer, and turns around and runs for her life with Marcy right at her side. And she tries not to look back, but something is commanding her to look behind them. So she turns around and she sees a man running straight at them. But he isn't just running, he's on his hands and knees. And Riley screams. And that scares Marcy, who joins in. And they start running faster until they finally get to the road where there's light and cars passing by. They'd run for about 7 minutes nonstop and were completely out of breath with their sides aching and cramping. And as they stop to catch their breath, Riley looks behind them again and sees the man way off in the distant darkness going back the way he came from. And they walk not even 2 minutes and they get to the convenience store. And the lady behind the counter gives them a weird look and says, "Are you girls okay?" And they both nod and in between breaths manage to spit out, "Yeah, just a late night run." And Riley could tell that the clerk didn't believe them. And she asked, "Did you girls run from the apartments?" And Riley answered, "Yeah, why?" And the clerk says, "Really? Are you girls sure you're okay?" And Riley and Marcy look at each other. And Marcy tells the clerk, "Well, not really. Something was chasing us, and we have no idea who or what it was." The clerk says, "You girls just ran from a skinwalker. It chases anyone it catches walking that road alone at night. You girls are lucky you made it this far." And as if the girls aren't shaken up enough already, what the clerk tells them rattles them even more. They don't have any money, so the clerk offers them a bottle of water, closes down the store, and gives them a ride back home. And as they drive by the bushes and trees that they had just run past, they all see something running in front of them. And the clerk says, "Just ignore it and close your eyes." And they finally get back to the apartment complex. And the clerk tells them, "You girls stay home at night now. There's no reason for you both to be running around at 2 a.m. Keep yourselves safe. You hear?" Riley and Marcy nod, waving goodbye and thank you. And they never left that apartment complex after midnight again. This story was submitted by Delta 412. We're going to call him Dean. Dean was around 4 years old when his parents bought this old 1970s RV. They decided to take Dean and his older brother Pat out on a camping trip. And Dean doesn't remember a whole lot about the beginning of that trip until that night. He remembers sitting around a campfire that night trying to make hot dogs and s'mores with his family, but the marshmallows were always so hot and they seemed to burn his hands every time. And it starts getting dark and everyone's tired, so they all head into the RV for the night. And Dean is still small enough that his mom lets him share the bed with her. And she tries to get some sleep, but as the night goes on, she finds herself awake, tossing and turning and just feeling kind of off. So Dean's mom is awake when something starts to shake and bang and pound on the RV. And his mom, feeling pretty freaked, grabs Dean tight. At first, she thinks it's a bear or something, but whatever it is, hops up onto the rooftop and tries to get in the RV using the emergency exit on the ceiling. And his mom tries to wake his brother Pat and their dad, but they seem to be long passed out. Not even all of the banging and the shaking is waking them up. Pat actually does wake up for about a second, lifts his head up, says, "What's going on?" and then immediately falls back to sleep again. And Mom is nearly in tears with fear. And she grabs her prayer book and starts praying. And Dean Well, he's sitting there calm in his mother's arms as whatever it is outside is wrecking the hell out of the camper. And he wants to look out the curtains to see what it is, but his mom stops him. But in the process, she catches a glimpse of something like a dinosaur on 2 legs. And as mom begins to pray more and more, it seems to anger the creature outside, which just goes crazy. And throughout the night, mom also notices that dad seems to occasionally stop breathing. So she is waking him every few minutes just for a second to make sure that he's still breathing. And she wonders what kind of creature has the strength to keep up this constant bombardment of the camper for hours. Mom reads from her prayer book all night and watches the sun start to rise as the blue sky begins to light up. But even in pale sunlight, the creature relentlessly persists in its attack. And Pat finally shakes awake, and he kind of groggily gets up wondering what the hell is going on. And about 5 minutes later, the attack subsides. And after the banging stops, Pat wants to go outside and get the tennis shoes that he left out there, even though he had just been woken up by some psychopath attacking their camper. Mom pleads with him to not go outside. But I guess you can't keep some teenagers from their Vans shoes. So Pat ducks out the door and in a few seconds miraculously makes it back inside the camper with his shoes. And he tells them he sees weird footprints all around the camper and claw marks everywhere. And that's when mom knows this was no ghost. This was a physical manifestation of something evil. And Dad woke up soon after, like nothing had ever happened. He basically slept through the whole thing. Dad didn't even believe in an afterlife back then, even though he went to church every Sunday. And everyone pours out of the camper to take a look at the damage, even though Mom tries to keep Dean inside for fear that this creature might come back. And it's full morning now, and the other campers are wondering what the hell is going on as well. They all see the damage that this creature has done, as well as footprints on the ground of a 3-toed beast and claw marks inches deep into the thin camper skin. Mom wastes no time and urges Dad to get them out of there fast. So they pack up the RV and head out. And as they're heading out, the police are coming in. Why? Don't know. But Mom thinks it's because of the ruckus that creature made all night long. What took them so long? Anyway, Dean's parents sold the camper soon after. And even after seeing the evidence of this creature, Dad and Pat, they just kind of blow it off and forget the whole thing. But Dean and his mom will never forget, as that was perhaps the scariest night of their entire lives. Mom thinks the campsite was maybe located on a Native American burial ground where the soil had gone sour. Or maybe they were just trespassing on a place that the spirits didn't want them to be. But whatever the case, something was definitely physically there, flesh and bone. And it was something from a completely different world. The writer of this story chose to remain anonymous, so we'll call her Anne. Anne and her bestie Karen go to college together, and Anne kind of wanted to learn more about Karen's Navajo background and traditions. So Anne decides to join Karen for a 3-day stay at Karen's grandma's house on the reservation. Her grandmother lives near Tuba City, Arizona, out in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by other rural homes. Now, the first day the girls are there, it's pretty chill. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until Grandma mentions that she saw a stray dog come out of nowhere, and it doesn't want to leave. And Anne's thinking, it is acting kind of strange, and it's kind of ugly looking. It's got a black, shaggy coat, and it looks kind of like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. The next day, Grandma's in the kitchen making lunch, and the girls are watching a movie in the living room, which has a large picture window with the curtains wide open that looks out onto the front yard where the cars are parked. Next to the window is a medium bookshelf where the DVDs are kept. And Karen gets up to put the DVD that they had just watched back on the shelf, glances out the window, and freaks out. The dog is staring at them through the window, standing on the wood box outside. Not something normal dogs do. And the other dogs in the yard seem to keep their distance. And Karen storms to the front door, opens it up, and yells, "Get off the box!" And the dog runs behind the shed. The girls head to Tuba City to get some groceries and come right back. And the dog is nowhere to be seen. Nothing unusual. And Grandma decides to go visit some friends. So now it's just the girls at home by themselves. And about 5 o'clock, they hear somebody trying to open the front door. They're both a little surprised because neither of them heard any cars drive out. And the dogs in the yard aren't barking. So they both go to the living room window so they can see who's at the door. And to their surprise and shock, they see that same black dog trying to open the door with its paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs. Anne certainly thought that was weird, but inexplicably isn't freaked out. Karen, however, is. She opens the door and chases the dog off. Grandma comes back later, and Karen tells her what happened. And Grandma does not like what she hears. But it's pretty late now, so all the ladies get ready for bed. Anne and Karen are sleeping in the spare bedroom because it has 2 beds and one window that's open just a little bit so they can get the night breeze. They turn off the light, say their goodnights, and the night quiet settles in until they hear a noise coming from on top of the roof. Pitter-patter footsteps and panting and scratching. Then whatever is up there sounds like it jumps off the roof onto this plastic water barrel that's outside. And they can hear what sounds like barking. But as it grows louder, the other dogs start barking as well. And something starts running around the house barking. And it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounds human. A deep male voice barking like it knew that they knew that it wasn't really a dog. Then panting again by the window. And now the girls are freaking out. Karen goes to the window and opens the curtains to look out. And there is the stray dog on its hind legs looking into their bedroom. But this time it stinks, and it looks like it's got 2 black holes in its neck with eyes that are twinkling like ugly, glossy spider eyes, and paws that look like deformed hands with overgrown, thick, sharp nails. Both girls start screaming and slam the curtains closed. Grandma comes running through the door, and she sees it too. She runs to her bed and grabs the shotgun that's underneath. Then she runs to the fireplace and grabs a handful of ashes. She grabs 3 shells, coats the shells in the ashes, and loads them into the shotgun. And she blesses herself in Navajo as she opens the door and heads outside to shoot it. And yelling in Navajo, she tells this thing it's not welcome here. Get the hell out of here. Go prowl someplace else. And being a traditional family, the next day, Grandma calls a medicine man to come over. And he prays over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather, blesses the house, makes them all eat some bitter herbs, and gives Anne an arrowhead. Apparently, she needs to carry the arrowhead and a small pouch of corn pollen for protection. And Anne says, "So far, seems to be working pretty well." The medicine man said the dog was a skinwalker. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, created an illusion so they wouldn't know it wasn't a real dog. He also said that skinwalkers tend to hurt people using some kind of human bone straw to shoot at someone, think spitballs, but deadlier, to get human bones into their target. Doctors can't detect it, but that day, the medicine man pulled a piece of human skull out of Grandma's right shoulder. It was like 2 inches long and a half an inch thick, and it was real. Anne and Karen watched him pull it out of her. That was intense. And if that Skinwalker extravaganza still isn't enough, click here for more. And we'll see you again on the In-Between.